attendee, but not a panelist yet.
Okay, we are now live streaming.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. This is the Silverton Board of Trustees regular meeting on March 22nd, 2021, and I call this meeting to order. Clerk Freeze, roll call, please.
Trustee Barella?
Here.
Trustee Harper?
Here.
Trustee Weigert?
Here.
Trustee Bierma?
Here.
Trustee George?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Here.
Mayor Furman?
Here. Administrator Edwards, would you like to lead the Pledge of Allegiance?
Would. Can you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any staff or board revisions to tonight's agenda?
I don't believe from staff, Mayor Furman.
Thank you. Trustees, any revisions to tonight's agenda? All right. Public comment period will begin now. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. If you are on Zoom and would like to comment, please click the raise hand button and you'll be promoted to panelist. I see a public comment. If you would please introduce yourself, you have the floor.
I assume you're talking to me, Tracy Boink.
Yes, Tracy, thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name's Tracy Boink. I have a written statement here I'd like to read to you all, which I did also email to you all, hopefully you got. So esteemed trustees, Mayor Furman, staff, and fellow community members, I moved back here in January, but I am technically homeless. Only because I have friends here offering house sitting or a spare room am I able to live here full time. But I'm just one of a growing number of folks trying desperately to remain or move here. Silverton is at a crossroads in many respects. While there's much debate as to Kendall Mountain development and OHVs, I believe not one person in this town would disagree that we are in a severe housing crisis. Last week, I posted a housing survey on the local Facebook pages, and I want to thank everyone who participated. Here is what just a few of the respondents had to say. I work in Silverton, but I can't find affordable housing to rent or buy. So I commute and find temporary housing when I can. The place I rent is not really affordable, so looking for something less expensive and can't find it. There is nothing to rent in Silverton. I was terrified of being able to find a place to rent each year, as many houses would sell or the owners would decide to convert it to a vacation rental. Not having a safe and secure place to live adds considerably to my anxiety and stress. If I can't find something affordable, I will have to leave. Let me repeat this last one. If I can't find something affordable, I will have to leave. This is our reality. There are currently 39 active vacation rentals in town. There are dozens of second homes that sit vacant most, if not all, the year. Housing rental prices have risen substantially. 2 of the largest apartment units in town have either been sold or are on the market, with the possibility that many or most of these units may be lost to either condo conversion or more hotel type lodging. That is 18 individuals or families, folks. However, the problem isn't just in rentals. The median sales price has maybe doubled in the last 2 years. I hear buildable lots in town are going for at least 100,000. The Silverton workforce simply cannot afford to buy or build. I implore the town to act immediately to dig into this issue. I recommend that the town and county establish a working committee that includes interested locals to see what creative, feasible, and sustainable solutions we can find that suit our town. It's a nationwide issue, so we shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel, but if we can, hey, that's great too. To look at fee structures, development costs, building and zoning regulations, and anything else at the town's disposal to help alleviate this crisis. I and others are personally looking at code revision because the town and county planner simply has no time. While we can't directly control the housing market, we can guide and control what is allowed or encouraged locally. It's imperative for the survival and sustainability of our community. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
I see we have another public comment. Mr. Hyrick, if you unmute yourself, the floor is yours.
Thank you. This is Albert Hyrick. I live at 20 East 10th Street. I'm commenting on the RFP for town attorney. I'm requesting that an addition made to the RFP to include the formation of a citizen-based ethics committee. I have asked for a discussion on this several times, have been ignored. The only response was an internal email between the mayor and the town attorney, agreeing it was best to just have the town attorney handle ethics complaints. Sadly, Paul hasn't. I think this past year has shown that this approach to keeping an honest government is a failure. Town attorney by himself is in charge of protecting the town government, not the residents. When we have a board that fails to honor its own rules or even respond to concerns of the residents, it leaves only litigation to seek justice and answers. That avenue is now more difficult with the addition of the county judge as acting as town administrator while serving on several committees. His involvement, no matter how small, in selecting town attorney candidates is a real conflict of interest, as his involvement in OHVs or really anything that may wind up in his court. The simple perception that it is a waste of time to fight town hall and court is enough to stifle justice. If I get run over by an OHV where I have asked for signs which were denied by Mr. Edwards, I sincerely doubt, no matter how nice of a guy he is, he will be fair in the courtroom. That is perception. Now we have a town board that won't answer questions or assist those they dislike. We have an incoming town attorney whose selection will be influenced by the very judge who would oversee any case, and the mayor. A town attorney who also serves as the ethics commissioner, and residents' last resort, impartial courtroom, is now perceived as just another town board doing the bidding of the mayor. So I ask that this addition of an ethics committee to the RFP at least be debated before sending it out. Let's have it on the record whether you feel what is happening at town hall is a normal and ethical way to do business. Let's clear the air, pull the town together, and move on. This is San Juan County, not Hazard County. We demand honesty, true transparency, and the highest ethical standards from our public servants. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hyrick. I do not believe we have any presentations or proclamations this evening. Oh, I apologize. I do not see any further public comment, but we do have one email received that I will read on behalf of the sender. The email's from Melissa Childs. She would like to comment on 2 agenda items on tonight's meeting. Regarding expanding the planning department, this is essential, as just dealing with the public inquiries to the planning department is probably a full-time job of late, let alone doing any actual planning and application processing. I recall years ago, Town of Silverton had an intern, Chelsea Stroberg, in the planning department. I believe the funding for this scholarship came from a Brighter Future scholarship and was facilitated through DOLA. This might be an option to gain more talent in the department. Regarding affordable housing, this too is essential. I look at surrounding communities and it seems their affordable housing programs are often a public-private collaboration with the public funding coming from local real estate transfer fees. I think we're one of the rare municipalities that does not institute such a fee. I do not think it will deter local buyers, as this fee is typical in most real estate transfers. The fees are typically a percentage of the purchase price up to 2%. 1% might be more palatable. Sometimes the transfer fees are split by buyer and seller, but often it's assigned to the buyer alone. I think this option should be included in conversations about potential affordable housing strategies. Thank you for your community service. All right, with that, I do not see any additional public comment. So we'll close the public comment period. And we do not have any presentations or proclamations this evening. So moving on to new business item 1, consideration to approve the first reading of ordinance 2021-01, restaurants, outdoor patio and alcohol service in town right of way. Is there any trustee comment before I go ahead and read the ordinance or staff comment? All right. Might as well get a coffee. This one's 5 pages long. Ordinance number 2021-01, an emergency ordinance of the town of Silverton for the preservation of health, peace, and safety to provide for the administrative modification of liquor licensed premises and the issuance of encroachment permits to facilitate outdoor dining within the town's rights of way. Whereas the town of Silverton, the town, is a Colorado statutory municipality governed by its elected board of trustees, the board. Whereas CRS section 3115-4011B conveys to the board the authority to do all acts and make all regulations which may be necessary or expedient for the promotion of health or the suppression of disease. Whereas the coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19, is a highly contagious virus that is spread worldwide and is causing serious illness and death in certain cases, especially in, but not limited to, the elderly or persons with underlying health conditions. Whereas pursuant to the Colorado Disaster Emergency Act, CRS section 24-33.5701 et sec, the town has declared a local disaster emergency within the town of Silverton as a result of the presence and threat of COVID-19 in the community. Whereas the state of Colorado and San Juan County Public Health have issued various public health orders, which initially closed all restaurant dine-in options and currently allow for dine-in at a reduced capacity. Whereas pursuant to CRS section 31-15-702 and section 11-2-10 of the Silverton Municipal Code, the board is authorized to establish rules to regulate the use and improvements of all streets, alleys, sidewalks, curbs, gutters, curb walks, and crosswalks within the town. Whereas the board of trustees desires to establish a process pursuant to which certain businesses may utilize extra outdoor space to better enable social distancing to protect the public health, safety, and welfare while continuing to operate and provide services to the public. Whereas the town desires to assist businesses by offering restaurants the option of using portions of the town public rights of way. Whereas in order to facilitate the business needs during periods of mandated social distancing, the board wishes to authorize administrative review and approval of permits to encroach in the town's rights of way by the town administrator or his designee. Whereas on May 15, 2020, the Liquor Enforcement Division for the state of Colorado issued emergency regulation 47-302 and bulletin 20-07, which established procedures to permit holders of specific on-premise liquor licenses to temporarily expand their licensed premises into contiguous or adjacent sidewalks, streets, parking lots, and other public and private spaces to facilitate social distancing measures while being able to operate productive and economically sustainable businesses. Whereas pursuant to emergency regulation 47-302, a licensee must seek permission from the local licensing authority in order to temporarily modify its licensed premises. Whereas pursuant to section 6-2-60 of the Silverton Municipal Code, the liquor licensing authority for the town is an appointed hearing officer. Whereas in order to facilitate the business of licensees and be consistent with emergency regulation 47-302, the board wishes to authorize administrative review and approval of modifications to licensed premises by the hearing officer. And whereas the board finds and declares that it is necessary and in the best interest of the health, welfare, and safety of the residents of the town of Silverton to permit administrative review and approval of liquor license premises, modifications, and permits to encroach on the town's rights of way pursuant to CRS section 31-14-4011B. Now therefore be it Hereby ordained by the Board of Trustees of the Town of Silverton, Colorado, that 1. Use of town streets. A. Covered area. The town authorizes restaurant businesses operating on Green Street and Blair Street between 7th Street and 15th Street, defined as the covered area, to utilize the existing and current public parking spaces along the north and south sides of the streets, subject to the requirements set forth below. Existing and current sidewalk configurations shall continue to be utilized for public and pedestrian access. B. Covered businesses. Restaurants and on-premises liquor licensed establishments as defined in section 2B below, collectively covered businesses, may utilize adjacent public parking spaces and adjacent outdoor areas of private property such as vacant parcels in the covered area to conduct business, subject to the requirements set forth below. The covered businesses shall only be permitted to utilize the public's parking spaces in the area that extends from one side of their front facade to the other side. C. Standards for covered businesses. All covered businesses in the covered area shall comply with the following criteria and standards. 1i. The temporary use area shall be clearly demarcated and cordoned off in a manner that separates the temporary use area from neighboring businesses and public property. The town will provide barriers for demarcation on a first come, first served basis. If the town's supply of barriers runs out, demarcation shall be done with high quality materials similar, should say in construct, the word is in there, to those provided by the town that preserve the characteristics of the neighborhood and surrounding businesses. Flimsy posts, caution tape, string, or easily damaged and unsightly materials are not permitted. Barricades may be required to protect the area from vehicular traffic. 2i. The temporary use area shall be maintained in good and clean condition. Trash shall be removed immediately, and any trash or worn, deteriorated, or unsightly conditions shall be repaired. 3i. Hours of the permitted use may be limited to minimize its impact. 4i. Noise levels of the permitted use may be considered and restrictions imposed to minimize the impact of the use. D. Application. All covered businesses in the covered area that desire to utilize public parking spaces or vacant property must first submit to and obtain approval from the town administrator or his designee. The application shall include 1i. A detailed description on how the right-of-way will be utilized and the type of barriers. 2i. A map of the proposed use. The map should be on 8.5 by 11 paper and include dimensions of the area and should reflect table sizes, distances between tables, and any service stations. E. Waiver and insurance. Excuse me. Upon approval of the application, the applicant shall execute waiver and indemnification for the use of the right-of-way, and the applicant shall submit to the town certificates of insurance, naming the town of Silverton as additional insurance and evidencing valid insurance policies for the following. 1i. General liability insurance with minimum combined single limits of $1 million each occurrence and $2 million aggregate. 2i. Liquor liability insurance in the amount of $1 million aggregate if applicable. F. Defense to certain town code requirements. It shall be a defense to a charge of violating Silverton Municipal Code sections 10-3-30 and 11-2-80 if the person is complying with and operating within the terms of this ordinance. G. Rulemaking and enforcement by town administrator. The town administrator is permitted, if needed, to implement any rules or regulations in furtherance of the equitable and fair implementation of this ordinance, provided such rules or regulations do not substantively change the covered businesses and covered area. H. Violations. Violations of this ordinance may result in the revocation of a permit to use the right-of-way by the town administrator or a denial by the town administrator of the ability to participate in the permitting of the use of the right-of-way. I. Term of approval. A covered business may operate in the covered area beginning no earlier than April 1, 2021 and no later than October 15, 2021. 2. Modification of licensed premises. A. Permit required. If an on-premises liquor licensed establishment seeks to temporarily modify its premises, it must first obtain approval for the liquor license temporary premises modification. The hearing officer for the local licensing authority is authorized to review and approve applications for temporary modifications of liquor licensed premises in accordance with Colorado Liquor Regulation 47-302 to accommodate temporary outdoor patios for on-premises liquor licensed establishments. Any area in the town's right-of-way subject to a temporary use permit and a revocable license agreement shall no longer be considered to be a public thoroughfare during the term of such permit and license. B. Definitions. For the purposes of this section 2, on-premises liquor licensed establishments shall mean an establishment that holds one of the following types of Colorado liquor licenses: hotel and restaurant, brew pub, distillery pub, vintner's restaurant, fermented malt beverage, FMB on premises, tavern, beer and wine, lodging and entertainment, optional premises license, club license, arts license, breweries, wineries, and distilleries with an approved sales room. C, applications. Applications shall be completed on Colorado Department of Revenue Form DR 8442 and submitted to the town clerk. There is no town license fee. However, there is a license fee of $150 payable to the state of Colorado. D, permit and duration. The town clerk shall contact the applicant once the town and state have approved the temporary modification. The applicant shall comply with all state and local requirements, including the requirements contained in Colorado Liquor Regulation 47-302. The effective date of any approved temporary modification of liquor license premises shall be no earlier than April 1, 2021, and shall expire at such time as dictated by the state or upon expiration or revocation of the town's temporary right-of-way permit. 3, repeal. This ordinance or any part hereof may be repealed by the board at any time. Such repeal shall be in the board's sole discretion. No holder of a temporary permit issued hereunder shall have any vested rights in continued operations under a temporary use. Application for and receipt of a temporary use permit constitutes a waiver of any claims a permittee may have against the town based on a continued right to operate under the temporary use. 4, emergency declaration. The board hereby finds, determines, and declares that it is necessary that this ordinance take effect upon the effective date due to the COVID-19 pandemic and to protect the public peace, health, or safety. 5, effective date and time. This ordinance will become effective on March 24th, 2021, unless otherwise specifically provided for herein, and will remain in effect until revoked by the board or October 15th, 2021, whichever date is earlier. Most restrictive standard controls. To the extent any state and/or federal orders or laws are more restrictive than what is set forth herein, such orders control. Introduced and adopted by the board this 22nd day of March 2021. Trustee Barella.
The only issue that I saw with this is that we let it go until October 31st last year, and it was determined by the board at that time. So my only question was the end date.
Attorney Kosnick or Administrator Edwards, is there a reason that the end date was made shorter, or was that just inadvertent?
I could comment on that, Mr. Mayor. I that was inadvertent. If it was extended to October 31st, there was no intention to shorten it at all.
Understood. Administrator Edwards, were you speaking as well? I think you were muted before.
I think Clerk Freeze had her hand up to respond to
Great.
Trustee Barella. Were you going to say the same thing?
No, not to her. There was another issue I had also.
Okay. Do you?
Just in the section 2, letter C, the $150 to the state of Colorado has been waived due to the COVID.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
This isn't a question about the ordinance, but I'm wondering if I don't know if John Seitz is on, or if are we repainting streets this spring? I was thinking about the parking spaces being used as the unit to measure the covered area.
Administrator Edwards, is that something that we can follow up on?
Can you, Trustee Barney, I lost you just for a second. I didn't realize you were directing something to me. Can you repeat that?
Oh, sorry. It's just a sort of an aside question, because the units of the covered area is marked in parking spaces. I wondered about if there were plans to paint those this summer or just remark that area.
Are you talking about the footprint, Trustee Barney?
I could go back and look at the ordinance, but just thinking about the space that restaurants have to use in front of their business, it referred to parking spaces. And I haven't noticed if the lines are clear or not, but I just thought I would ask about repainting the streets.
Okay. Trustee Barella, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, that's pretty typical, done in usually the beginning of May, that the town does the street washing, and then they come through block by block and repaint everything. It's been happening for years that way. I don't think, unless John's on here to say any different, that's typically the mode of operation, so.
Okay, so do we need a motion to approve?
Yes, we do.
I can
The
do
first
that.
reading.
I'll make a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance number 2021-01. Do I need to read
Wait.
out the whole label of it?
I think we just need to refer to the modifications suggested.
Oh, right, with the end date suggested by Molly Barilla of October 31st.
And Clerk Freeze.
Oh, and the waived
Note.
fee. Sorry, Clerk Freeze. With the modifications mentioned previously.
Second.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Barney and Trustee George. Clerk Freeze, roll call, please.
Trustee Barella,
Recuse.
Harper,
Yes.
Trustee Weigert,
Yes.
Trustee Beerma,
Yes.
Trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes. Thank you. Moving on to new business. Item 2, consideration to approve the Bruin Waste contract. Administrator Edwards, would you like to, or Director McDougall, would you like to address anything in the contract proposed?
Sure, I'm going, sorry, Mayor. Go ahead. Do you?
That was it.
Okay, so yes, trustees and mayor, Director McDougall and Kelly are going to be presenting this. The contract is not before you. We're going to be presenting what is proposed and the reason why, and then we will get the contract to you after reviewing with Paul with any changes, if those changes are made, and hopefully on the next meeting. Unless there's a request to meet sooner for this due to timing considerations. So I'll let Bill go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. Just a quick background. Bruin's contract is 8 or 9 years old. Should have been renewed a couple years ago. So the manager for Bruin, Chris Troper, got a hold of me and asked me to pursue this. And as some of you know, I've had some experience in working with the transfer station over the years. So I took it upon myself to do this with help from Kelly and Anthony and the rest of the staff. Chris presented us, and in your packet, you did receive a page that had the highlighted charges. We also presented you with a page that is a very quick, brief quasi spreadsheet of what these increases turn out to be financially. Maybe I should back up. The contract itself is not going to change other than with the dollar and the number amounts that are presented by Bruin Waste. There is one change in it. I should say it not completely. They want the contract now to be adjusted annually for the consumer price index rather than every 8 years. They've been operating, we're about 20% roughly behind where it should be. Currently, this raise represents about a 25 to 27% increase. So really not much more than what the consumer price index would have been had we raised it annually in the past 8 years. So that's why those numbers, when you look at them, you'll see that if you compare them to the old numbers, you'll see that they're quite a bit higher. You will have the old numbers in the contract in the next few days. And I take blame for that not being in the packet. I apologize. But Chris, really, that's the manager, really wanted to see if we would at least move forward with you guys looking at this tonight and seeing what we could do. And I'm think that if, when you read through your package, you obviously saw the numbers. If you look at the spreadsheet, you'll see that we are doing a couple of different things. We are increasing this number, the actual increase, the net cost increase includes an increase in service, which I think most of us realize we desperately need it for the in-town cans and so forth. We're going to go from 3 times a week to 4 times a week for the months June, July, August, and see and kind of play it by ear in May and September. I myself, working with John Seitz and Todd Bove, we have organized where the cans are going to go. I have a complete breakdown of the location of them. The Blair Street cans that were designed for Blair Street will be on Blair Street. Main Street will have the Main Street cans, et cetera, et cetera. There's some detail in here. I think if it's okay with you guys, I'd be happy to open it up to any questions you have. And I'll be, I think I can answer most of them, but we're working at the expense side of this contract right now. It is an increase of approximately $30,000. Kelly and I and John, but mainly Kelly and I, with Anthony's help, we've been looking at the revenues side of the equation. We have a lot of things we're working on. We don't have any details to present to you yet on that, and it will be a few months before we get to it. Assuming this contract could get approved in the next couple of meetings, that means that we would be kicking in, say, May 1st, for example, approximately a 7-month increase in our fees, or an approximate gain for 2020, or approximate increase in expense in 2021 of about $23,000. We have $39,000 in revenue balance in the transfer station account right now. So if there were no gains whatsoever on the revenue side of the equation, we would still not have a cash flow issue for this year. Kelly and I, with the help of all the staff, have really come up with some very good ideas. We're readjusting some expenses or some revenues. And I think when we make that presentation to you, hopefully in another month or so, you'll see what we have in mind to be a very positive thing. It's not going to be major effect on any one particular category per se, although there is a category or two that's going to see more of an increase than others. Most of the general businesses, no major increases, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't really want to discuss that too much because the contract's the main thing. Suffice to say, we feel very comfortable with you guys approving this contract and recommending it. And we feel very comfortable in continuing our relationship with Bruin. I think most of you know they got a new truck for us this year. I mean, it is brand new. And he has assured us that we're not going to have breakdowns. We were very thorough with that conversation as far as not having an excuse for that. And so generally, I think we probably are looking at one of the best years ever coming up as far as trash in our town being picked up, et cetera, et cetera. I think staying with Bruin is a very wise choice, folks. Respectively, I don't think we'll get any other bids if we put it out for bid. But if we did and Bruin had to rebid, they would be higher than what our contract is going to come through at, which is approximately $232,000. Last year, our cost to them was $202,000. And I'll answer any questions you shoot at me to the best of my ability.
Well, first of all, thank you. We all very much appreciate the work that you and Clerk Freeze put into this. It's very thorough and well thought out. I'm guessing that the questions that I have are unlikely to be addressed immediately, but I was wondering if we could put these on a wish list and maybe request a timeline from Bruin Waste in terms of when they might be able to address these things. So the first one that I've heard over the years is nicer bins available for rent for businesses that are more bear proof. And the next one is, since we do have recycling at the transfer station, is it possible to get recycling bins next to the trash bins throughout the town as well? And the critique that I've received from citizens is that it's hard to expect citizens to bring their recycling to the transfer station if the town isn't kind of setting the tone that this is something important to us. And then the last one is if there's any kind of efforts that can be made around the transfer station to improve the visual impact, like landscaping or improvements to the fence in terms of not being able to necessarily see into the transfer station. And like I said, I don't expect those to be reflected in this version of the contract, but it'd be great if those were topics raised and could be put on a wish list, and maybe, you know, target timelines included by Bruin of when they may be able to address those, or even putting costs, associating costs with those improvements so that we have the option to consider.
So noted. I have taken notes about those, and hopefully I can have some answers initially in the next few meetings.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mayor and trustees, I just want to circle back around. You have in your packet what Bill and Kelly put together and put in the packet. And my question, and I realize that you may have more questions at our next meeting. That's when the contract will be provided and details of the contract. Generally, are there questions about or why this is being suggested, this increase for the Bruin contract at all? Why Mr. McDougall's here? Is there anything that you can think of right now you'd like to see before the next meeting or make sure is in the next packet other than the contract? Okay. Thank you, Bill and Kelly.
Thanks, you guys. And you guys know how to reach me anytime. If you have questions that come up, just call me, text me. We can keep this discussion open. You guys have a good evening.
Thank you. You as well. All right. Consideration to approve the Dirty 30 special event application. And I believe we have Megan Finnessy on the line.
Hello.
Hi, Megan. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
If I can just preface this, Mayor, by saying this is an event we've hosted here in Silverton for many years. Didn't happen last year, but we're excited to have it back again this year. Megan is requesting a change of venue. She'll be looking at using the field down by the track and the ball field, just south of the visitor center. And she'll be working with Jim Donovan and the OEM team on all the safety precautions needed for COVID safety precautions there. So I don't know if you have any specific questions for Megan, but hopefully it's a pretty cut and dry approval process.
Trustee Brella?
I just want to say I'm glad to see this back up, Megan, and I'm glad to see that you moved it down there just to eliminate the traffic issue and everything by the post office. I really hope that this new location will be exactly what you need going forward, and I'm happy to make a motion to approve the Dirty 30.
Thank you. We'll see how that venue down there, you know, has potential to work. So hopefully we can make it work this year.
I can second that motion.
Thank you, Trustees Brella, Trustee Birma. Clerk Freeze, roll call, please.
Trustee Barla,
Yes.
Trustee Harper,
Yes.
Trustee Weigert,
Yes.
Trustee Birma,
Yes.
Trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you. Are there any questions about event planning or anything at this point? Is it all pretty clear? And I don't know if everybody's seen the documents I sent over to Lisa.
Your information was really thorough. That was a great course too.
Yeah, people are really excited about it. I currently have the 60K is filled and overbooked for cancellations at 120. There's probably near 80 signed up for the 100K and probably 71, 72 for the 100 miler. So I'm looking to bring 300 racers to Silverton on 6th through the 8th of August. Plus their family and friends.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for all the support I've gotten from the town and over the years. This will be the 5th year running of this race.
Well, excellent.
Thank
We have
you.
a quiet crew tonight.
Thank you. Well, I'm just going to say no questions and comments is a good thing. Thank you.
Well, wonderful. Take care, and we look forward to the event.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Moving on to consideration to approve, and I'm going to say it wrong, but the Aravipa special event application. Julie, can you correct my pronunciation?
You're so close. Aravipa.
Aravipa.
You're basically there. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm also happy to answer any questions on this event.
Lisa?
I just wanted to chime in quickly and say that these guys were able to hold their event last summer very successfully. They did a great job of jumping through all of the necessary hoops for COVID safety and set a great example for our other outdoor events. And they've just been a pleasure to work with. And again, if you guys have questions for Julie, I'm sure she's happy to answer them, but we'll be getting all of the necessary approvals from the sheriff, from the OEM, et cetera, for this and for the Dirty 30 prior to the event happening. So yeah, I give it a thumbs up. I really enjoy working with Aravipa. Did I say it right?
Very good.
Thanks.
Trustee Brella?
Okay, I'd like to make a motion as well to approve the special event civic function contract for Aravipa running, because I miss Jamie.
Second that.
Thank you, Trustee Brella and Trustee George. Clerk, please roll call, please.
Trustee Burla,
Yes.
Trustee Harper,
Yes.
Trustee Weigert,
Yes.
Trustee Bierma,
Yes.
Trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes. Well, wonderful. We look forward to this event as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Lisa, for the kind words. We look forward to coming back this year.
All right, the next item on our agenda is consideration to approve the expansion of the planning department. And I'd like to kick this off with a thought, which is that the planning department is the citizen's best defense for preventing something you don't want to see in your backyard. I believe this department requires as much support as we can give it.
Thank you, Mayor. Lisa, I'd like to share my screen if I could.
Give me just a second. I'll get you that permission.
And Lisa Adair can weigh in after I have some slides I'd like to present, a suggestion. It's clear that the planning department is backed up, and I'll go into that in just a moment. And we have a lot of movement in the community right now, and there's some things that we need to be addressing. I would like to present these slides. And basically, I'm starting with almost a recommendation that we consider somebody like RPI to come in out of Durango and maybe give us a price on what it would cost to come in. The idea is to get a bid or a cost estimate, what it would come in to look at what we have and what we may need. We could do this in a couple of different ways, but let me go ahead and get that up. Can I share, Lisa?
You should have co-host permissions now that allow you to share. Let me know if that doesn't work.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. So the planning department it requires more work than we have allocated for it right now. RPI is a consulting firm. Gabe Preston, some of you may know him, but he and that firm have been around for a couple of decades. They're experienced in updating town regulations, and there's a DOLA grant available if we decide to go this way. Silverton is experiencing an increase in development proposals currently in town proper. In regards to why we need to consider something of this nature, there's architectural regulations. There's no architectural review as it relates to architectural regulations. There's no architectural review as required right now. No architectural guidelines exist outside of the downtown historic overlay district. So we're talking about the extended business district. We are having an increase in density proposals, and while we may prefer density on the one hand, higher density proposals can create adverse impacts to the neighbors, citizens in the community. For example, parking. The town planning staff at this point is budgeted for 20 hours per week. This does not allow for quickly updating town zoning. To give you an idea, there's a lot of permitting that goes on and reviewed that really takes the most of the time of the planning department. There's a backlog of town zoning regulations which need to be revised. Zoning maps and application forms also need updating. And this predates the current planning director becoming, this predates Lisa. Finally, and this is not an exhaustive list, it's just some primary examples, but there's limited guidance in the municipal code for the town board approval or denial. Use subject to review applications, and for example, avalanche zones. This leaves in obscurity and abstract, really not specific type of guidance on whether to approve or not approve, which leaves us in can leave the town as well as the planning department in an uncomfortable situation and something that should be addressed. So that's it. Lisa Adair's here with me as well. I don't know if Paul wants to weigh in. I will say that Gabe Preston works with and doing code revisions, does work with an attorney, Todd Messenger out of Denver, who is one of the firms who actually applied with the town. His firm did. But I'm happy to take any questions, but really what I'm looking for are your thoughts. Lisa, if you have any input, as well as would it be okay for me to look at what a cost estimate would be to come in the interim before we get through the summer and into the fall to look at what it would take to bring somebody in to work on some of this with Lisa and the board.
Trustee George?
Yeah, would bringing in, I guess, Gabe Preston and his company, that's a short-term fix for maybe what might be a long-term problem if we have limited help right now. are we going to need to search for a permanent help for Lisa, or for, I'm sorry, for the planning director Adair for a long-term fix for this? Or are we thinking that bringing in Gabe Preston's company will square things away and then she'll be able to move forward, you know, with the tools she has? Or I guess, is this going to be a long-term solution, or is this a short-term fix?
Tyler, I appreciate you asking that. I'm going to tell you, based upon what my understanding is, the town is looking into. They're looking into a master plan process that's going to be guided somewhat by the community builder's vision or visioning process, or whatever we want to classify that as. I don't believe that the master plan process will be probably complete for 8 months to a year. I'll let others weigh in on that, but right now, and so once that would come into place, then you would do a you would relook in a more expansive way to the master plan. You'd use the master plan to work on your zoning and your regs. That type of delay right now, I'm concerned, and others have expressed concern, that doesn't address some things that are have been recognized and have been backlogged and that need to be addressed with somebody right now. Now, to answer your question directly, as to whether Lisa would be able to move on after a short term, addressing the short term or even long term, I don't believe so. I think the town has come to a point where it's going to have to invest more in its planning department and efforts. But that's something that we could discuss with RPI and Gabe's group, and let me be clear. I'm looking to see if I can have permission to get a cost estimate of what we're looking at. I'm not asking for a sum right now. And that wouldn't mean that this would probably be a bidding process of some sort after that was brought to us, depending on what that looks like. And that's for the short term. That's for the immediate term.
Thank you.
Trustee Brella?
So back when we were doing the budget sessions and the IGAs, we had actually asked the county if we could separate the building department in order to take some of the burden off of Lisa in reference to this exact thing, and really had come up with a lot of useful tools that we have done in the past, as stated in Melissa's letter as well. Do we have anything going on with Best and the Brightest? Are they available? Is this something that we can look into as well? There was a lot thrown out at that table at that meeting, and I don't know what's been pursued. I'd like to see that as well, just because it was, I don't know, previously discussed and okayed by this board to move forward in that direction. So I know we've had a lot of change again. So, but that needs to be brought back to everybody's attention that this has already come up. So are we going to use any of our older ideas from what, just like 4 months ago? Or are we just going to scrap it and start something different? So I'd like to hear from the rest of the board, please.
Trustee Birma?
Yeah, this might be directed at maybe Lisa or Administrator Edwards. But is the type of work in our backlog that needs to be accomplished, I guess, in your opinion, is it going to be more expedient to get someone like RPI who's an expert at what they're doing, who's going to get it done potentially faster, but maybe at a higher cost, versus taking Trustee Barella's route where maybe we're hiring sort of an intern who's learning on the job, and maybe takes a little bit longer to do some of the backlog work?
I mean, Trustee Bearman, I think that's a loaded question, and so much that the best and the brightest, we don't know who we're going to get. I can tell you that Lisa is not going to have the bandwidth to do what's needed right now. And if we do want that work, the backlog to be addressed, we need to do something. I'm not, Trustee Barella just made a mention of the best and the brightest. I need to go back and identify, or people can bring information to me if there's something else. I'll follow up with Willie. Trustee Barella, I think that's who you said had the ideas on that. But I don't, it will require something outside if we want to catch up on the backlog in a timely manner by this summertime. To have extra bandwidth beyond what Lisa is able to do based upon the workload right now. Lisa, do you want to weigh in on that? If you feel, and don't feel uncomfortable correcting me if you think I misstated anything, please.
I don't think you've misstated anything. There's two parts to the town planning. That's site-specific town applications. We don't have any control over the amount of those that we receive. That's taking up most of the planning time right now. And then we also have a backlog of town-wide code updates to take care of. And so what Willie and Anthony proposed was to get a professional to help us with those code updates. And then we have a lot of incoming town applications right now to process. And that's processing site-specific permit applications. And that's a result of our vacant land. The reason it's still vacant is because it's in hazard zones, lacking infrastructure, et cetera. So all the vacant land remaining requires special planning permits. So those are site-specific. There's so many of those that the backlog of town-wide planning code and form and map updates doesn't leave a lot of time for those.
Lisa, sorry, Mayor Furman, I want to emphasize something right now. Lisa, can you identify those once more? Because I want everybody to understand what's backlog. Go ahead.
That would be the municipal code, the section that relates to land use and zoning, what's allowed and what's not allowed in certain zones. That's town-wide codes that apply to all sites within the town limits. Additionally, we have 8 zoning maps that are all different. Those should be improved, and a brand new map should be adopted so people can figure out what their zoning actually is. We also have forms that don't exist, and what forms that the planning department does have. Some of them were prepared, decades ago on a typewriter and are rather outdated, and some are not even existent.
So my take is that from observing the planning department and the planning commission and the number of requests coming in for the town and the county, and us having a one-person department with some additional help from other town staff, that the planning department needs all of the help it can get. I don't think it's a bad idea to look into the best and the brightest, but I don't think we should rely on that solely. If the RPI route is eligible for a 50-50 matching grant, that may be less expensive than hiring more senior expertise before we run that process through, and use that as best we can. But it sounds like this department needs to grow in order to meet the demand upon it, and that if it doesn't, we're leaving ourselves susceptible to less desirable development.
You actually only have a town planning department that's a half of a person, and the county is the other half of me. And then the town board did allocate 24 grand for this year for a planning assistant. And I'm putting together an advertisement for the interim town administrator to review, to get a trainee in to help with some of the easier clerical parts of the application process, like stuffing envelopes, adjacent landowner letters and notifications, making photocopies, filing, and helping with the influx of town permit applications. And so that's already in the budget for 2021.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
So I guess I'll just say that I'd be really interested to learn what the cost on the RPI option looks like. So I do want to find out about that, but not exclusively of other options. It sounds like we can probably piece this together with other areas of support, like Best and Brightest and Planner Adair, what you were just mentioning with the $24,000 in the budget. And I think money spent on planning is money well spent. So I'm very much in favor of supporting the planning department.
So just to be clear, I think what I'm hearing, and I just want to get a nod or a thought, or I just want to get direction here as it relates to this. As Trustee Barella said, I need to find out what all the options are. Maybe we use multiple, but I need to go back and talk to Willie on that. And then I'm still uncertain whether it's okay if I ask RPI to look at a proposal for the short term. Is it okay if I ask them to give us an estimate on what that would be and the detailed? Is that?
Trustee Barella?
I think we should pursue all avenues. This is what we
Okay.
had discussed back in the budget meetings and when we were going over the intergovernmental agency agreements, because we knew Lisa had a full deck already and we were kind of going off of her recommendations by the allocation in the budget already for this year. So any help that we can get her, but I don't think we need to throw away the ideas we already have and only focus on one. Let's put out the feelers to everything that we possibly can. So yes, please get a proposal.
Awesome. And I'll just ask that in the inverse as well. Do any trustees have any objection to the town looking at all available options to expand the planning department?
No, absolutely not. I think we need to get them all the help we can, especially Lisa, if you would just clarify, you said, I know this, but just so everybody knows that you're only half of a town planner for us, the town. Can you just clarify that, please?
The planning department is county, half funded by the town, half funded by the county. So my time's supposed to be roughly split 50-50, but it's not at present. One thing that I noticed about RPI, about this concept of having these pros rapidly fix up our codes, I think one of the reasons it was brought up and suggested by Willie Tukey and Administrator Edwards is because we have the availability to have DOLA pay for a good portion of that with a grant. So I think that that's an advantage to RPI helping with the codes. Then there's the everyday site-specific application work. And there is a part-time trainee already in the budget to start learning some of those clerical tasks.
Okay, we have our call. That's, I think we're good. I need to get more information back to you as soon as, hopefully next meeting can have a detailed report and that you all can consider.
Wonderful. All right. The next item in the agenda is discussion of affordable housing. I believe Administrator Edwards, you've got something prepared.
Sure, it's not a slideshow. I just wanted to update the board and just basically this has been on the tip of people's tongues now for a while. It's been brought up earlier tonight. I think that the trustees received a letter also from our participant earlier, Tracy, and she's brought some information up to me, but I wanted to go over and just let the town just point out to the community as well as the town some of the history of the town's involvement in affordable housing. And it's been often with partners. The first one was Colorado Housing Inc., and it was the home ownership program that would result in the 3 builds that have been built in the community. That's an ownership program. I think it's an important component of what's happened over the years. And the town was involved in that and providing variances and other things in that process, and I think could do so in the future. Staff has supported Bill McDougall has worked closely with the county, and obviously we share Bill as well with the county, but has spent a lot of time out on Anvil. Some of that time is with the town and working with it. And then the town staff has most recently identified and researched property that the town owns and could be used in the future for potential housing in the community. And that's been a survey that's been done more recently and is being worked on. It's probably appropriate that this just followed what Lisa said, that, about the map and the zoning maps and some of those issues. But now the town's looking into mitigation options in avalanche zones and in some other areas. I don't know, Lisa, if you would like to weigh in anymore on the history of, or not the history, but on the, although you know it, just how it was presented, but on housing as it relates to the survey that you and town staff have been working on.
I did create an inventory of the town-owned land, and a lot of the town land is just utility easement strips of land along alleys. There are some parcels that potentially could support affordable housing, and there's a good portion of the town staff that's been working on this issue for I would say it's getting to the point of being decades. In particular, Administrator Edwards and I met in 2002 working on affordable housing. So that was 19 years ago. So the town's definitely trying to do its best to address this issue, because I agree, it's a critical, it's a housing crisis at this point. So we're definitely looking into what we can do about it.
Thanks, Lisa. Inspector McDougall, would you like to weigh in any at this point?
I think my quick comments would be, we have some opportunities that possibly can be presented to the board as recently as a couple months from now. And that might be a joint working with the county. That's one option. There's some land we can look at. There's a lot of plans that could happen, but I know everybody in the meeting this evening is aware of our land costs. And that's really, as we all know, the prohibited factor here is acquiring the property, number one. And then secondly, of course, is getting the construction done. And I think everybody here is aware of both the increase in property costs, but I think maybe not as aware of the huge increase in building costs that have taken place in the past year. And that's 20% at least. And I see it every day when I'm working with the contractors trying to bid houses. They literally cannot bid something without building in a surcharge potential for increase in costs during the construction phase. So we've got a tough road to hoe, but I think we have some ideas, and it's something that's always interested me. So I think we'll be working together on that in the next few months.
Thank you, Director McDougall. The last thing that I'd like to talk to you about, there are some opportunities at the state matching for governments to purchase property for affordable housing. Matches in the neighborhood of 5 to 10, 7 to 10, maybe even up to 9 to, excuse me, not 7 to 10, sorry, 5 to 1 to 7 or 8 to 1 matches that we may be able to apply for. And I think in light of what's been brought forth, we should probably talk in a work session coming up about potentially if the town trustees are interested in going after or looking at the opportunity to get a large match that would be a grant to the town to preserve some land if we can identify a property which could be used for future affordable housing, whether it be ownership or some other type of housing.
Trustee Wiegert.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that, this has been a long ongoing issue for a long time here now, going on 20 years plus. And my 5 years on the board, this is something that we've consistently talked about. We've explored options for tiny homes. There's certain issues that we have with temporary structures that don't have foundations and plumbing. We've taken measures to try to promote low-income housing out in Anvil Mountain by cutting the cost for taps and facility improvements for deed-restricted low-income housing. I think this is something that's going to take ongoing work, and this is an issue all across the nation right now. It's not just here in our little hamlet. So I think it's something that we need to stay on top of. We need to keep doing whatever we can, but it should be made clear that we've been working on this for a long time, and we just need to keep our nose to the grindstone.
Thank you. Kind of adding on to that, something, we recently approved the ADU ordinance that increased the ability of property owners to add ADUs to their property and limit those to long-term rentals. So that is a good step in the right direction.
There's
another.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, Mayor Furman, there's another thing that's coming up, and it's to limit. There's going to be a proposal to limit and downsize the number of permits for VRBOs. And that's coming. I know that was well thought out by many people on this board and staff. I say well thought out. It's one of the things that has been discussed. And so I think that's another way that the town is looking at this problem, is not increasing, not keeping the same, but is going to staff. And I know that you can't maybe weigh in on that right now, but staff is going to bring a potential ordinance to downsize the number of permits, weekly permits available.
Thank you. That was my next point too. And then I had two questions. The first is, I'm curious to what extent the Planning Commission or the Planning Department are considering the pros and cons of allowing single lot builds in R1. I know that we allow that in the BP district, but I know that snow is an issue with single lot builds in R1, but I was curious if that's something that is on the radar of the Planning Commission. I've heard it mentioned a few different times, but I don't know what the status is. And then the other question is in a conversation I set up with Andrew Atchley, who's the housing development specialist with DOLA, and former Administrator Ryder and Administrator Tukey. He suggested that we look at updating our rental housing needs assessment, which was done in 2016 in connection with the Anvil development. And he said that you can kind of do a feasibility light update if you have a relatively recent plan that could cost as little as $750, that could give us a better understanding of what the needs are, taking into account recent builds, recently approved builds, and looking at what's vacant today. So, and maybe that could be expanded beyond rental and also look at acquirable. So those are two questions that, you know, is that something that we can look into, or is that already being looked into?
I think we can look into everything, Mayor Furman.
Great. Trustee Wiegert?
I will say that with the previous planning director, we did explore the option of building on a single lot. And with the setbacks currently as they sit, it was determined that you really would not be able to feasibly build a livable structure with the current setbacks on a 25-foot wide town single lot. And so that is something that the planning department has already looked into. And Lisa, planning director Dara, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was the determination that we came up with.
What you described makes sense, although I've never looked into it, but it's mentioned in the master plan. A single lot is 25 feet wide. If we have side setbacks of 7 feet, that means the house would be 11 feet wide, which could be doable. But I've never specifically looked into that. And a problem that I have is there's all these things I would love to look into, but with 20 hours a week allocated and 60 hours a week of permit applications coming in, what needs to be done in the town planning department is, despite my best efforts, there's not enough time to get all this stuff done.
Thank you. Trustee Barella?
You're on.
Okay, you're completely right, Jess. That's exactly what we did. Or the single lot, which has been discussed many times. And the other reasons that we were kind of denied a lot of that had to do with the I don't know exactly what to call it. Oh gosh, it's the fire rating that we get in town in order to keep everybody's insurance lower, because the buildings, single lot builds, yeah, they're too narrow, they're too squished in, and snow loads, this and that. Because I really thought single lot builds would be great and do it like row houses, like they do in the east, and just go up multiple stories. Most of the ones in Washington, D.C. are only like 12 foot wide, but they go up 3 stories. But it had to do with the fire rating, and I'm not sure exactly what it's called. Chief Archuleta would be able to address that for us, and that was another reason that we couldn't do it.
One other idea that I had that I was curious about is I've seen in other communities the proposal of some type of vacancy fee for people who leave homes vacant. That hasn't been well received in any communities. So I'm wondering if that could be flipped around, and if we could look at incentives to long-term rent houses that are otherwise vacant. One of the facts that was presented to us at the master plan committee meeting by the state demography office a couple of months ago is that we have a 40% vacancy rate during the winter in terms of houses in town. And that's just homes that are owned but not utilized in the winter. And so something else, you know, if there's a model somewhere for incentives that can be provided to those homeowners to rent long-term to residents, at least for the winter, even though that may not work year round, that'd be something to possibly look into. Trustee Birma?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to comment on what you said. I was going to bring up the idea of a vacancy fee too, but I do like the idea of incentives better than fees, just in general. Yeah, this is an issue that I'm pretty passionate about, and I have a lot of ideas I've written down. So I'm just gonna throw them out there with, with the disclaimer that I know a lot of people have been working on this for a long time, and a lot of these ideas have probably come up before. So apologize if I'm reiterating other people's ideas. I also know there's no silver bullet for a housing solution. It's going to take a lot of different things working in combination. And I think a good start to that is shifting our perspective as a community from short-term gains into more long-term viability and sustainability ideals. Let's see, where am I going with this? I don't know. I just view housing as a right, and I feel like, a working single parent needs to be able to afford to either eventually own their own home here, or at least rent at a reasonable price. So I think it's going to take a combination of public and private ways to accomplish this. So yeah, I had a vacancy tax, on occupied homes that are occupied for less than 6 months of the year, obviously excluding long-term rentals and workforce housing and things like that, as a way to fund different affordable housing programs that the town could create. And kind of reiterating what Melissa said would be about creating a transfer tax, and also a transfer tax that might be higher for non-locals. Creating more things that can drive our house price back down. I'd rather homeowners lose 10% of their value rather than losing 10% of our population to gentrification. And you could create that transfer tax the same way we create deed restrictions, looking at a percentage of the AMI corresponding to the size of the house, as one way. And I think the town needs to acquire more land, especially looking up at the area Pond Shrine or other large tracts of land that we could acquire, because the town can bond those infrastructure costs and pay those out over a longer period of time rather than a private developer. And we could reserve that also as affordable housing for the future. And not only just and creating mixed income units too. So we're not ghettoizing a specific area of town as just affordable housing. Reevaluating some of the zoning. I know tiny homes have been brought up before. Maybe, I don't know if their technology has progressed in which we can reevaluate tiny homes again, or even off-grid construction. Because a lot of those things are more affordable for low and middle income families. Also, with having policies that would generate funding for affordable housing programs, we could purchase either vacant land or dilapidated houses and sell those houses back at a loss, as a deed restricted dwelling, and encourage long-term occupancy rather than short-term occupancy, because I think it would pay off for the town in the long term. And I think just investing in more long-term infrastructure would be better than short-term gains again. And I know a lot of these things are more feasible than others. And just looking for other more sustainable ways. I know this idea is kind of out there, but there's a lot of room for solar panels on the south facing slopes over by the Anvil subdivision, and you could have a neighborhood that's powered by solar. And looking at these more longer term projects that aren't necessarily cost effective in the short term. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Burma. Trustee Brella?
I agree with a lot of your sentiments, Jordan. I had come up with, when I first got on the board, I was asking why we don't have a transfer tax. That was one of the big things that I thought that we needed, and it's against the Tabor. We would have had to implement it quite a while ago. I mean, probably like 25 years ago. And so it's not a feasible way to move forward with the transfer tax. I'm all for picking up the dilapidated houses. However, we need to do this because this is a big concern. I'd like to see a lot more duplexes and fourplexes. I thought the gal who brought up the project last meeting and the planning commission, that's a great way to move forward on a lot of these projects, because that's what we need. We need affordable spaces, my kids included. As adult children, they need a place to live as well. And I'm glad this is back in the forefront. This is one of the things that I ran on because I'm very impassioned about it. And I had said back when the county was doing that the units that we were building at that time were not adequate. It was adequate for just that little window. But I knew that they would not be adequate for the future. So I'm glad that the county project went through, and I thank the county for working so diligently to get that done, but it wasn't enough. We should have looked further into doing more. And I'm glad it's back in front of us. Sustainability, what is truly sustainable? The thing with solar is approximately half an inch of snow can shut down a solar grid. So that's the only problem that we have here, unless it's angled right and this and that, unless we can figure out how to get Teflon on the top of them. So it just slides right off like it would on Pro Panel. But I think these are all wonderful ideas. And I really hope that we can direct staff to move forward in this, or maybe we should look at doing it ourselves. What else can we bring to the table? What research can we do as individual trustees to take some of the burden off of staff and then present it to staff and then let them move forward with different ideas? Because we are putting a big burden on them with the limited staff we have. Or do we look like this? Maybe it's something like Best and Brightest again that can bring in these solutions for us. There's tons of stuff that I wish the rest of the board could have gone to a CML, because you would have met everybody from all these housing authorities. They will tell you what projects are going on. They will tell you how to get to them and how many steps it takes to accomplish them. I really hope CML opens this year in June and the new trustees can go to see what is available and ways to accomplish it. Staff as well. It's an amazing conference if you guys can go. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Barney. I think you're muted.
Mute. Thanks. Okay, thanks. I think this is an important conversation for us to have. I hope we can continue it in a work session. I will say that I had a similar question about the real estate transfer tax. My understanding was that it wasn't legal, as what Trustee Barella said, but I wondered if there was a sort of a workaround for that. I think there are other ways of maybe looking at something other than a real estate transfer tax, but that also creates some income for the town. In all the research I've done for Kendall, town managers that I've spoken with have all recommended that the town acquire as much property as quickly as possible to support projects like this one and potentially others. And my last point is just a question for Lisa, or for Planner Adair. I've seen this in the paper in various years. I'm wondering if you have sort of an estimate on like what supply is actually coming into our community. Like, do you have an idea of how many builds are coming up this year or what that looks like? I'm just curious about how that looks for this year relative to, I don't know, last year or even just previous years. Is it what's that data?
Well, Bill McDougall and I work on that kind of stuff together, and I'm not sure what's going to be built this summer, but I know that the planning department, it's March and it already feels like it's July in the planning department. Right now, during this meeting, I'm putting together a planning commission packet that has 11 projects, and the deadline hasn't even been reached yet. So, I mean, I have 15 applications in front of me in March. I did hear building inspector Bill McDougall mention that I think he has 10 projects going on right now, and it's March. So he's expecting a very extremely busy summer. And in general, I think it would be a good time to expand the planning department, and then more could be done with all of these topics. For affordable housing in particular, I would say that that was my number one issue when I was hired about a year and a half ago. So the first two ordinances I tried to rewrite was accessory dwelling units and then vacation rentals. So those were the two ways I started to try to attack that issue. And then if a piece of land could be acquired, the problem is, where do we get the money for that? But adjacent to Anvil Mountain subdivision, which I worked on with Willie Tukey since 2003, there's a large parcel of land right there that would work perfectly. The problem is, where would that money come from? Other than that, the remaining vacant land in town tends to be floodplain and avalanche zone, or lacking significant infrastructure and obstacles to development.
This has been awesome, but I think we're just kind of barely touching the surface. And I think Trustee Barella's suggestion was a good one, that maybe we can participate in this a little bit more with staff to maybe explore these ideas further, create a priority list of which ones are the most actionable in the near term and which ones we need outside resources for. Would this board support a work session before our next meeting from 6 to 7 to spend an hour diving more into these topics? Awesome. Does that work for staff?
We're here at your pleasure, Mayor.
Party time.
Okay. Staff will work on some.
Sorry, go ahead.
Mayor. Staff will work on this, and please, if you have ideas that you want us to integrate into some sort of general agenda, please forward those on to myself.
I guess one last overarching question I have is, do any of these issues, like a transfer tax or other incentives, have any bearing on our decision to be a statutory town versus a home rule town? That's a question that's come up a few different times relating to incentives, and I haven't done the research yet, but I'm curious if that's a totally separate topic or if that has some bearing on our ability to do projects here.
I would ask Paul to weigh in on that, and I'm not expecting it to be in depth, but do you have any thoughts on it right now, Paul?
My only thought at this point would be that it depends on the exact proposal. Obviously, it would have to be any proposal that the town adopts you have to find that authority in statute. And the difference with the home rule municipalities, some of them have that authority in their charters. So that's the difference there. So I guess it's somewhat dependent on exactly what the proposal would be at this point.
Thank you. All right, any other discussion on this topic before moving on? All right, Cemetery Advisory Committee update and discussion.
Todd?
Yes, sorry. So if you look in your packets, page 97, there's a facilities, parks and recreation, additional information sheet for you all. I hope you all had a quick chance to review it. Myself, Kelly, Casey Carroll, and Darlene Bolfing, who I'd like to thank, Darlene and Casey especially, who are volunteers working on this. It's kind of an informal citizen group that we've kind of got together to really give the cemetery the attention it deserves. The first recommendations that have come out of these meetings, kind of the low-hanging fruit, is the cemetery fee schedule. In 2019, we saw the sale of 3 cemetery plots. In 2020, that number increased to 28 cemetery plots. So the increase in volume made us take a much closer look at what's going on over there. And it was the recommendation of the committee that the trustees review the fee schedule. You can see in that same presentation the recommendations of the committee. This is a non-action committee, so it's simply intended to do some research for the board and kind of keep us focused over the long term on what we can be doing at Hillside Cemetery, which is not only a valuable part of our community, but a valuable tourist attraction for people that come visit our community. A lot of people do spend time up there, and I think the intention here is to match the surrounding communities in fees, and ideally over time build up some reserves to do some longer term improvements up there, specifically with aging masonry, fence repair, staircase repair, and general beautification efforts. So with that, I'd be happy to field any questions from the board. And I think the recommendation is pretty self-explanatory. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. So trustees, any concerns or questions or suggestions related to the advisory committee's recommendations to increase the fee schedule?
No,
Well, Todd, you did.
Looks pretty good. I just was wondering, do we have a total amount of plots? I see that we've increased from 3 to 28, but is there a cap on the number that we can sell?
There's not, to my knowledge. The cemetery requires a great deal of effort to kind of unwrap. Plots aren't even zoned or surveyed. There's rocks essentially up there holding as place markers for people who have purchased plots. The intention of this committee was to start kind of addressing all of this longer term stuff. Bev Rich is going to be joining us, I believe, at our next meeting. She's a wealth of knowledge and a great resource regarding the cemetery. And I think if Kelly has anything else to add, she's been very involved in this also. But the goal here is to really kind of start providing some more organization up there. And the cemetery dates back quite a long way. So we're not even sure who's buried where in some cases, or what plots are taken, who reserved a tree. So it definitely warrants a great deal of attention. And I think we're trying to give it the attention it deserves.
I would say, yeah, we have 2,000 plots that are unknown out there. And I don't know if you can really see this. This is kind of what I've done as to what everybody's bought and to where I can kind of figure out where everybody's going. But yeah, the increase in fees would help a lot to do a lot of work out there.
Sorry, Trustee Brella.
Yes, I was going to say, we all know the saga of the cemetery, not knowing who is where and what is who, or who's on top of who. So the major question, I guess, is that if we do increase these fees, that we can earmark all of this to go directly into the cemetery fund, because I know that we've got some, I know the original Italian retaining walls are amazing, but some of the ones that were built subsequently later have been deteriorating, and those have needed work for quite some time. So that way we can earmark this for the actual specific projects at the cemetery rather than going into the general fund. So I am for that. I like the increase. Looks good. Looks like this is something well needed. If that is a condition, I am very for this if that's a condition.
Thank you. Trustee Harper.
Thank you. With the jump from 2019 to 2020, from 3 to 28, Looks like people are dying to get in. I've been wanting to use that all night long. Is $350 enough? Should we increase it further? I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Yeah, or also along the lines of Trustee Harper's question is, could fee increases be relative to or in kind of it, if we know the expense up there? Like, I know that this is a lot to unpack. I'm not suggesting that we have any idea of like how much the improvements to the cemetery would cost, but that idea of like earmarking the money to go towards the specific projects, if we had a sense of, you know, how overwhelming those might be, then maybe it would make sense to have the fee be relative to the work that needs to be done.
Trustee Varela.
Have we ever had bids on those additional retaining walls that need fixing? Does anybody know? I know it's been brought up for years. No idea. So maybe that's something that we should look into. And that way we can base whether or not these fees are high enough for additional usage going forward. I like that idea, Sally. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
I guess I'll say one more thing too. As a member of the Parks and Rec Committee, it's so cool to know that we had these conversations several months ago and then see how the process works itself out. This is a total success story. So for anyone who's participating here, I think this is awesome the way Director Bove has brought those initial conversations and then turned it around, and here we are talking about it. That's something I don't think I completely understood before I was on this board. So thanks to Director Bove for continuing to follow up and be on top of these conversations that come up in our committees.
Thank you. And I would like to specifically thank Darlene and Casey, who are citizen volunteers. And in a lot of cases, that little bit of community support goes a long way with projects. It really helps staff when we have engaged citizens and community members willing to step up and volunteer their time.
Administrator Edwards, are you going to add something before?
No, I think that we could, I think we need to raise the fees sooner rather than later. I don't know what the fee schedule is though. When Kelly, can you, when are you hoping to have the new fee schedule out at this point?
We were shooting for April.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about raising those higher and we need more time to review that, I just wouldn't want to slow down the process of getting those fees determined before we put the fee schedule out. That's all I'm getting at. I think it's what Trustee Harper brought to the attention is worth reviewing, but it's probably need to decide that sooner rather than later. And maybe that doesn't have to be tonight. But if we're going to do a motion tonight, we probably need to know the number, or we could table it. Would you prefer that we have a fee ready for your fee schedule work that you're bringing up, getting ready to present to the board, Clerk Freeze?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want everybody to be aware that she's ready to have a fee ready if we could do one. But obviously it's up to the board if they want us to explore higher than what's being recommended right now.
Trustee Harper.
Can we get this fee in place and then look at it 6 months down the road or something like that, just so that we can get this increase in place?
That would be my recommendation, Trustee Harper. Just, I think it deserves, they've done a lot of homework and I think it deserves looking, continuing it. I don't think this is something that, oh, we're done now. But that would be my recommendation. I would want Todd and Kelly both to weigh in on that as well. Do you have any, would you agree that it would be good to get something in place
Yes,
now?
definitely, just because we're selling so many. Like Harper said, they're dying to get in. The subject wasn't dead.
Trustee Brella?
Are we asking for a motion right now to accept the Cemetery Advisory Committee, or are we going to just put it on the fee scheduling? I just need that clarification. Because if the fee scheduling is coming out in 2 weeks, is 2 weeks going to make a difference and we can review it all as a whole?
I think we can review it as a whole. I don't think we have to have a motion right now. Paul, if I'm off, let me know. But the thing is that if we're going to stick it on the fee schedule, we probably, instead of continuing that discussion at that time, we should have some sort of idea that you're in support of the fee schedule that's recommended at this point. We good?
All right. Any additional direction needed or sought? Cool. Well, thank you very much. Our next item is budget update.
Sure, I'll go into the budget as it relates to where we are currently in our revenues, as it relates to general revenues. We have the year-to-date budget was 117,505. Our actuals at 120. So we're above at 2,946. When it comes in to the licensing, liquor license permits and those matters, we are a little, we're 4,451 below what was we budgeted. And in the intergovernmental revenue, 7,559 below, and then the charges for services, 2,341 below. And then miscellaneous, we're 8,109 above. When we go down to the contributions and transfers, we're again, we're it looks like 3,357 below what we were predicting. I think the important thing as it relates to the budget at this point, or I don't want to say the budget, is that the revenue that's coming in, we're at 128% of what we were at last year for November, December, and January. We probably will go up a lot more, and the comparisons in the coming months will be a little skewed because we did have the COVID restrictions that came in, and it may not be the best comparable. Overall, in the general fund right now, we have $1,141,000, give or take $1,000 or $2,000. Are there any questions generally on the budget? And if you can, just direct us to the top page number. And Kelly, if you want to weigh in on anything, feel free to. I should have probably asked before. I know you've been working, doing a great job on keeping the books in order. Go ahead, Trustee Harper.
Thank you, sir. I had a quick question, page 72. just the general sales tax, we had budgeted 82,000 and change, and our actual is 106, a variance of 23,000. Do we know what that's
Can
attributed to?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do we know what that jump is attributed to? I'm
Can
assuming
you,
that we based our budgets on historical numbers, and that's a huge jump. That's great. It's fantastic.
what line item is that? Jim, excuse me, Trustee Harper.
That's all right. You can call me Jim. Just don't call me late dinner.
All right.
Page 72.
Yes.
It's the general fund. Just looking at the third item down, it's just general sales tax.
Oh yeah.
That's a big increase.
It is, and I'm not. Look, I don't know how we're having some of the increases we're having, and I probably need to look into it and try to figure it out. It can be difficult, but I can't tell you right now. I can tell you this also, that we are going. This will be brought up a little bit later. Well, I'll save it. Kendall Mountain is making a profit already this year, and their sales, and so we are not in the red, and so everything from here on out is profit, and it's up 5,000, and it's probably going to end between 5 and 10. Trustee Barella, I'm sorry, did I answer your question, Trustee Harper? Okay,
that's perfect. Good. That's perfect.
Okay, Trustee Barella.
This was something I asked at the last meeting about the ability to segregate out what we receive as internet sales taxes because of the United States versus Wayfair, because that is our massive increase. I know that you and I, Anthony, with consultant writer, were given that information through Mr. Tukey, and it's kind of crazy. I mean, it's a 1 cent tax on one item. It's a 39-cent tax on another. And so we were trying to figure out an algorithm to take that information from the state and put it into an Excel sheet to make sure that it can just separate out the local businesses, because between the county and ourselves and the town, we have everybody's parent company name of the businesses that they run. So you can't just go by like Golden Block. I'm Golden Block Brewery LLC. I mean, obviously mine's not that much different, but other people have very different names that their businesses are run under. So we can make a comprehensive spreadsheet that we could upload that into, so we could see the separation out of the internet sales tax, because this is tax that we've never collected. I mean, shipping into town, if you were buying it in another state, was always free. So this is a massive influx of all taxation across the United States because of the Wayfair judgment. So if we can get that done, I mean, it's going to take a while to figure out how to create this correct spreadsheet. But if we can get that done, this would be very useful for all of us to see internet sales versus sales in town, just for our own knowledge. And that'll tell you what we're lacking in businesses that we can't buy in town, or that people have a tendency to send away for more, that maybe that's an opening for a new business based on those type of theories. So I think it's really good information. Lord knows, hopefully within the next month, we'll be able to have this and be able to present it to the board.
Trustee Barella, I understand we want to get that, and you saw some of the documentation. It's not as easy as just adding numbers. I will say that we are receiving a check regularly, and I am trying to figure out it. So we received the funds from the county for our sales tax, and then we receive a Department of Revenue check separately. And I'm trying to figure out if that's related to that issue or not. Kelly and I are working on that right now. Kelly, did you want to add anything else onto the budget discussion for this evening?
I'm looking.
No,
Kindle lift tickets are up from last year in February. We didn't have really much of lift tickets in February, but showing right now we're about about 13,000 for lift tickets so far. Mullis Lake reservations is up quite a bit. Was only about 11,000 last year. We're at 20,000 already for the month of February. So we're doing really good on those too.
And that's all pre-sales.
Yes. And the pre-sale system, just to remind everyone, is not one where everybody can buy and then just what was going on is that people were getting most full refunds or very high refunds and just reserving everything and then canceling. So there's a better system in place, and kudos to all the people on staff. And when it comes to Kendall, kudos to Todd, Lisa, and Chris over there. They've done a great job of preparing for this year, and the staff has done exceptionally well, working with Mullis and Kendall. So. Are there any other questions about the budget? If not, we can go ahead and keep rolling. And I know Jim's going to get tired here in a minute. Anyway. Okay. I think it's.
All right. Consent agenda items. Do we have any questions or notes to pull out of the consent agenda, or does it look good to everyone as is? So do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda? Trustee Barella?
My question was about Target rentals.
Say that again.
Target rentals?
That was for stuff to help thaw the pipes.
Yeah.
Up at Kendall.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Clerk Freeze, roll call, please.
Trustee Barella?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Weigert?
Yes.
Trustee Bierma?
Yes.
Trustee George?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yes.
Mayor Furman?
Yes. All right, over to you, Administrator Edwards, on staff reports.
Thanks. I'll go ahead and I'll start. On the staff report, I put on there the immediate trustee considerations. That's what we had tonight. Bruin waste contract, park ordinance, the cemetery fees and event permits. I think you pretty much knocked that one out. The contract wasn't there. I know that Bill McDougall took responsibility, but it's my responsibility as much as anything, but we'll get that done, okay, on the Bruin contract. In regards to the upcoming items, we have the attorney RFQ review. I sent that out. You should all have 3 proposals. I've let all of those individuals know who did put a proposal in on that early date that they could update that. So, it's only the dates that changed. I haven't received any feedback, and let them all know that they've have their receipt. Trustee Weigert, I was basically, I think I used the wrong email for you. I hope you're getting everything. If not, I apologize. The same was on
two of the attorney proposals. So I must be missing one of those.
Okay, I'll look and find out which one I used the wrong email, and I'll let you know. Okay, or I'll send you the other this evening.
Okay, thank you.
And then the administrator RFP is out. I had mentioned previously, going back to the attorney, Trustee Barella asked me to send whoever that was that came in early, that individual was just asking me to send the RFP. So we'll see if we get one from that individual. There wasn't actually an RFP. There wasn't actually a submittal on the attorney RFP that I had mentioned in a previous meeting. The administrator RFP review is out. The other stuff is in there. The upcoming stuff is the Columbine Park funding consideration we're wanting to talk about in April, and then the Kendall Deck funding consideration, and then the Mullis Lake Campground maintenance funding consideration. Mullis Lake has done really well for us, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. There are some maintenance issues. The camping's taken its toll, and there's some thoughts on that. And then the sign ordinance will be coming up soon. And I just want to put that on your radar. That may be a busy April. I'll try to keep the agenda from going too long. The two things on the report I do want to point out and give kudos. One, I already did to a certain extent, but I think it deserves more kudos. Like Kendall Mountain, the Good Sense update, it's making a profit right now, and that's great. And I think that goes to a lot of the efforts that were put in that aren't really seen by Todd, Lisa, and Branner and Chris. And then I want to shout out to Kelly. I have one on there. She's working on another one. She's she's able to dig in, and she was able to find a couple $1,000 or close to with on the Aflac account, the spending that we didn't need to. And it's just always good to recognize staff when they're finding ways to save money as well. And I think that's it for now. In regards to staff reports, Lisa Branner, did anybody have any questions for myself, or would you like to hear anybody else's staff? I mean, obviously those reports are in your packet, and I would also ask staff if they'd like to elaborate on anything at this point.
So if I may, I'd like to add just a couple comments on the attorney report, which I haven't done in a long time. But it is, as you transition into a new attorney for the town, Administrator Edwards and I talked about kind of some of the priorities that he'd like to see wrapped up prior to that new attorney coming on. And the one thing that we kind of discussed and decided was certainly a priority is updating the job descriptions and the classifications and the personnel manual for the town. That has been kind of an outstanding issue that's been going on for years. It is something that, has kind of been poked at in the past, but really it has not been comprehensively addressed. So that's something that I intend to work with Administrator Edwards on, and hopefully trying to get to a resolution prior to bringing on a new attorney for the town.
Thanks, Paul. Kelly, did you want to give an update?
As I know Sites had got on, and I had he forgot about the meeting, but he said that he was going to do the restriping this summer or this spring on green, so it'll be ready for the bump outs.
I see. Oh, John Seitz was under attendees and looks like he had his hand up to speak to us.
Go ahead, John.
Yes, I wanted to clarify that. I missed the earlier part of the meeting, but we are going to be striping this year. Lines are getting pretty faded. Last year, we opted not to stripe to try to save money under the COVID circumstances, but we need to get it done this year. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thanks, Kelly.
Okay, are there any questions for Todd or Lisa? Or Todd or Lisa, would you like to bring anything to the board's attention at this time? Okay.
Thank you very much. Committee reports. Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Okay, I'll kick this one off. So obviously we've talked about Kendall making a profit already, but I just wanted to bring that up as part of the Kendall committee report. Not related to the committee, but super exciting. And it has been really, really active and thriving over there this winter, which has been super fun. As far as the committee goes, I think at our last meeting, I might have mentioned that there is a chance we would present the RFP post public comment and feedback on it for tonight's meeting, but obviously we aren't doing that. It's not ready. We had roughly 50 people attend the RFP feedback work session in the evening, which was great. And then it's taken us a couple of meetings and probably one more that we haven't had yet to incorporate and review the feedback and then give it a final review. So the month of March has an extra Tuesday meeting, but we won't meet March 30th. We will meet again on the Tuesday in April at 3 o'clock. April 6th. I might have to look at my calendar, but the next meeting will not be in March. It will be in April.
Thank you. Trustee George or Trustee Barella, would you like to provide an update from the OHV task force, which is not technically a committee, but seems like it would fall under this section? Trustee Barella?
Everything is that the committee's working on is at the end. So I think it's self-explanatory with what's been included in the packet.
Great.
Thanks, Trustee Barella. If I just might add that the next meeting, and it'll be a work group meeting, the public can observe, obviously, as they're welcome to, is this Thursday from 5:30 to 6:45.
Any other committee meetings in the last 2 weeks? Trustee Harper.
Thank you. In the last 2 weeks, we had on Tuesday, March 16th, we had a planning commission meeting where we discussed at 7:01, Austin Lashley is changing the design of his house. And then at 7:30, Stacy Hunsicker purchased a mine claim and is looking to create a summer location for herself and her family. It was pretty short.
Thanks. Trustee Harper, can you, or trustees in general, is that something that you want the administrator to attend, that planning commission meeting? Is that one of the ones that was traditionally attended by the plan? Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I
do have a planner Adair. Did I miss anything? Or Trustee Wiegert, did I miss anything?
I would say we had a pretty long discussion about our architectural review overlay that we had discussed for the outlying portions of Green Street that are outside the historical overlay. And we're disappointed to find out that that's being bound up in bureaucracy. We were hoping to get that instated and to the trustees before the start of the construction season here, which, as you know, is within a month away. And just curious as to if that's something that we're going to see at the next meeting, Interim Administrator Edwards, or where we're headed with that.
Jess, can you just clarify for me what the town needs to have, town staff needs to do to move that forward? I mean, when you say that, is it because we're overloaded, or is there something that you're waiting from myself?
Not necessarily from yourself, but was sent to the one of the committees. I believe that's the code committee.
That's
and
correct.
there were some changes. Planning Director Adair, please help me. But some changes instated that now seem as though we're not going to get that ordinance to the Board of Trustees here within a reasonable amount of time.
We did talk about the architectural review overlay district proposed ordinance briefly at the Planning Commission meeting, and that was March 16th. And that proposed town ordinance recently was reviewed by our Personnel and Ordinance Committee. And there was discussion about extending the proposed district to include the Shrine, the Shrine Hill or Taylor's Edition. And so that's on my list of things to do, is extend that or propose 2 different versions, one including the area near the shrine and one without. It was originally intended to address Green Street and the Y. And then there is a need, of course, also for different review process and regulations up by the shrine. So that'll be up to the town board which way to outline that district.
And I believe it's important for the town board to know that the planning committee feels as though those are 2 separate entities, and they need to be governed under 2 separate reviews, architectural reviews.
Jess, can you tell me what you think is probably ready to come sooner rather than later, or am I misreading what you're alluding to?
The planning committee, town and county planning committee feels as though that we should get an architectural review ordinance in place for Green Street and the Y, just as Planning Director Dare has stated, without the Taylor's Edition. That should be a separate deal all on its own, we believe, and we'd really like to see the Green Street and the Y protection come before the Board of Trustees here sooner rather than later.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Sorry, Trustee Barella, I just was wanting to get.
At committee, we said to get it in front of the board immediately, and then if we wanted to add, then we could add. I'm not sure if that was not clarified, because I mean, I have it in my meeting minutes, but that's exactly what we said. Just get it in front of the board the way it sits right now. We will make revisions after we get it set in place. It's just to protect us right now. And the addition of these items, it doesn't matter how they become part of it eventually, but it just so that they are included in the historical review, the architectural review was the board's recommendation. So I know that Anthony couldn't attend that meeting, which is why I had asked if we should continue, because sometimes things like this fall through the cracks because you don't have the person there that's going to implement it. So Jess, I think it was just a small oversight because people couldn't attend the meeting, because I expected it on this one as well, based on our conversation a couple weeks ago.
Okay, if I'm hearing everybody correctly, that you expect this on the April, I think it's the 8th. Anyway, the first week or the first meeting in April, this ordinance needs to be ready to review.
Yep, okay. I confirm what Trustee Barella said. We said to expedite this one as much as possible, and our last meeting was on March 4th.
Okay.
And so we thought it was going to go in front of the Planning Commission, then come straight here.
Okay. We'll get it on there. I want to make sure that I understand what we're having on there, though. That is the Green Street and Y is what needs to be on the April 8th. It's not the second part. Go ahead, Trustee Barella.
It's the existing one that Lisa already has. It's called the Architectural Review Overlay District. So
Overlay District. Okay.
Yes.
And that does not need to come back to the Planning Commission, because we've already recommended approval to the Town Board of Trustees, and so I think it just needs to go ahead of the Board of Trustees at this point.
That's fine.
Correct.
Thank you for that clarification. It will be on the next agenda at the top of new business.
Thank you.
Any other committee reports? All right, trustee reports. Trustee Brella.
Well, I'm going to bring up a subject again. I've talked about it before, and I noticed it on Todd's staff report. I have asked for years, why do we keep the planters in the middle of Main Street? I have tons of photographs of them being obliterated, knocked over, hit. So I have asked that we put them on the corners or somewhere in the middle of the sidewalks, and we can have individual businesses sponsor what goes in them, take the burden off of town. This is what we did outside of my business in downtown Durango for, good God, 20 years. We had the planters out front. I sponsored one, my neighbor sponsored the other half, and that's how all the flowers get planted in them. I would like to see that. I hope this board would agree that they're nice, but in the center of the street, they get abused a lot. So I don't know if I can get a consensus of this, or if we can try to push this as an agenda to the public or the business owners, because you do get better care of them when you've got the individual businesses there. You take more care of it, you go pick out the trash, you make sure that they're watered. I think it's a more feasible way to keep these planters and to have them actually beautify the town as an overall look, rather than in the center of the street where they get hit, knocked over, and then you've just got a pile of dirt that sits there for the next 4 months after it's been abused.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
I don't have strong opinions about the planters, other than I think they should have something in them that's growing and looks beautiful. Can they be put in part of a bump out or incorporated into the outdoor dining somehow? Or I don't know if that's a possibility.
Oh.
How many do we have?
Todd, do you know how many mining carts we have for planting?
6.
6.
John, you're on top of it tonight. I mean, we don't have to decide placement tonight. That's the kind of thing that I could see could take us on a long path. Why don't we let staff maybe kick something around and bring some different ideas. And obviously, Trustee Barella, you could bring something back. If somebody has a thought now, I worry that we're going to get into a game of, Penn and Teller, just rolling it around.
And just to add to what Trustee Barella was saying, I too have watched vehicles run into these things, and I don't know where the proper placement is, but if there is another one out in front of the Grand Imperial, I'll be more than happy to water it and put living plants in there. So, and Trustee Barney, you're right, they need to look nice. That's our centerpiece.
Is it okay if we take it to our staff meeting and throw it around the next couple of weeks? I mean, not during the whole staff meeting, obviously, but just come up with some ideas. Okay.
Any other trustee reports? I have a few things. We are almost 1 year in, and mostly due to the virtual environment we're in, we still have not had a board workshop. And we are desperately overdue for that. one of the topics that has frustrated me for years that I'd like to be able to talk about at the board workshop is the manner in which we permit community engagement in these meetings. I know there's a lot of pros and cons to having a live Q&A, offering more time throughout the meeting, but it always feels very awkward to me when community members ask questions or make good points, and the expectation of the board is not to respond. So I think that's something I'd like to at least evaluate, see what other communities do, see if there's some type of solution for providing a more meaningful level of engagement with community members live during meetings, as well as a ton of other things that should be on our board workshop list, like our goals and priorities, which we've kind of just adopted from the last iteration of the board and haven't revisited as this iteration. So that would just be a general request to look at scheduling for the board workshop. Another one is I'd like to clarify something from the public comment tonight. The idea of an ethics committee was raised by a citizen by email in the past, and I'm looking at the correspondence relating to that, where I recommended to the former administrator Ryder that this would be a potentially valuable topic to discuss with trustees. I did not suggest that this not be looked at, but it was never put on a meeting agenda. And so if the board would like to consider the discussion of an ethics committee, I welcome that. That's it for me.
How do we add it to a future agenda? I think it's a great idea.
Great.
I'm gonna recommend that you consider make it a work session, and only because I think that just having it on some of the agendas that we have coming up could turn into a very long discussion. I also think that we should ask the attorney to Kosnick to maybe provide us a couple of different ways this is done in other places. If you, Paul, I know that you gave us till the 2nd. You said you'd stay till the 20th, and I know you're not going to leave us. If the board was okay with that recommendation, would you be open to bringing us some different models?
Yeah, I'd have no problem. There's several jurisdictions that have implemented successful ethics committees, so I'd be glad to bring one forward, a couple of different options.
I kind of rolled over the trustees and the mayor. Are you comfortable with that proposal? Okay.
And also thank Mr. Heinrich for bringing that back up tonight. Thank you.
Any other trustee reports before we move on to continued business? All right. Attorney search process.
So I'm going to begin. I just, it was brought up earlier, there's concern about my being involved in the attorney search process. Just to be clear to the trustees and the public, Attorney Kosnick and I talked about it early on, and there's never been the intention of me being involved in choosing the attorney. And it would be unethical, and it was never even considered. So if there is any request or anybody asks about that, that's not going to happen. In regards to the attorney search process, that was extended, as the trustee Barella pointed out, when that when that RFP went out ahead of time and jumped the gun. And so we have, and I've let the people who've already submitted know, and we did correct that fairly quickly. I do anticipate that we'll receive additional proposals, but that will come in and we should know by 5 o'clock on April 2nd when that what we have to review. Are there any questions on the process right now? Okay. And then the administrator search process. That's, sorry, Mayor Furman, I'll let you.
No, please jump
So
right in.
the administrator search process, I haven't received any inquiries to date. I don't know if Paul or the mayor have. They haven't said anything. I don't think they have. That is out in the Grand Junction paper, in the Denver Post, and on Indeed, in the Albuquerque Journal, and the Farmington Times, on CML, and on CCMA, Patrick Rondinelli. I can't remember you know what I'm referring to, Trustee Barella. And then also was asked to put it on CAST. I think the only thing it's not out on LinkedIn, is LinkedIn, excuse me. The only thing it's not out on yet is LinkedIn, and I apologize. I haven't got it on there yet. Are there any questions about the administrator search process? Trustee Barella?
Trustee Barella?
Oh, Kelly had her hand up. I don't know what she was going to say, or did Anthony cover it?
Kelly?
I said, there was an attorney that reached out to me. He couldn't get the link to work, and so I helped him out. So I know there's one more coming.
Okay. Thanks, Clerk Freeze. Okay, the final continued business is related to the discussion of summer OHV strategy. We've had our meetings and we're going into our third meeting now later this week. We mentioned the time, and I think, we'll have Public Works Director John Seitz and the Sheriff Sheriff Conrad will speak on behalf of the Sheriff's Department on this Thursday. We're just going to continue to discuss potential solutions and what maybe complexities there are to managing things in the summer this Thursday, and probably start working on identifying the recommendations and what's going on. Obviously, we've put our ongoing working list in the packet. I don't know if there are any questions about that at this time. Crickets. Go ahead, Trustee Barella.
I'll go, since this was asked earlier. These groups have been wonderful. All the feedback has been very informative. You hear, when you bring it to the public, you hear different opinions than just these, the people sitting in front of us and staff. There's a lot of concerns that people have, and a lot of it focuses around signage and education. And I think that the most productive part of this is you're getting everybody. You're getting the anti, you're getting the for, you're getting the whole gamut, and they're trying to coalesce to figure out what the best course of action will be for the summer. So I appreciate all the work that the volunteers have put in. I realize that we've had to have double meetings sometimes, just because not everybody at every time of the day can meet. It's not like a trustee meeting, so I'm relying on volunteers. And I think it's very productive. I think it's very productive without engaging the Public Works Director and the Sheriff's Department yet, because you're actually listening to the public. You're not just listening to the figureheads that you know, they're in it every day, but they see a different perspective than the community sees. So I think breaking it up like this has been a wonderful session, and people really do need to feel they have their say. I've brought this up before. I know, Shane, you just brought this up about the way we engage with the public, because people don't feel like they get their voice. So giving people their voice, letting them come together and actually work on something, it makes people coalesce. It stops anxiety. It stops all of it. And so I'm looking forward to the next meeting. To then, now we have what the citizens believe are the biggest problems. Now you bring in the heads of these departments to see if we can compare and contrast everything that's going on. So it's been very productive. I think the groups are great. I thank Anthony for bringing this all to the forefront, and I thank everybody for volunteering. Tyler, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, the only other thing was, aside from the education and signage, was the enforcement. But like you said, once we get all the ideas from the public, we can bring it in front of Town Works and the sheriff and see, you know, which of these are viable and which of these ideas are going to have the most effect to sort of help with the flow, or the, you know, some of the anxiety, like you said, that the citizens had. So no, it's been very helpful to hear everybody's ideas and thoughts, and I hope that we can get some of these ideas implemented before, but well, we will definitely try to get them implemented before the start of the summer. So thanks, Anthony, also for putting all those meetings all together and keeping them, you know, flowing and moving along. So appreciate it.
Sure. It's the staff, and it should be noted that the community has been very respectful of one another. It's.
Oh, Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
I just had a question about the grant that just came in this week or last week. I know the town wasn't a part of it. It was a $250,000 grant. And I wondered if there was any plan for the work group to integrate or collaborate with the organizations that received that money to try to think about how it's incorporated into some of the ideas that come out of the work sessions or the working group.
Trustee Breland.
I believe all of that was devoted to counties. So there's nothing wrong with opening up conversations, but once again, I'm gonna go back into that and say we have one thing to concentrate on, and that's the ordinance that exists for the town of Silverton. That is a larger conversation for the future. Right now, this working group has one objective and one goal, and that's to figure out how to mitigate the issues that have come up in previous years. And I want to also remind everybody that Parks and Wildlife came out with a 40% increase in all public spaces, including public parks. So, and that was last year's number. So that's why our forest was full. And then they're not expecting it to be that much different this year if most of these COVID restrictions are still in place and people can't go to Europe and all the other places they normally go. They're spending it interior and outdoors in the summer. So we need to expect those larger increases. So I'm glad that the county, in addition with the other counties, really went for these grants and pushed for it, because that's the help that's needed for the backcountry and the additional programs in the county, and potentially even a staging area, which we agreed that a letter would be sent to the county and asking for additional area for the staging. So we're all working in the right direction. Let's get the working group to finish what our one task is, and that is on the ordinance that exists. And then we should open it up to have a larger working group in order to really incorporate both town and county to figure out how to mitigate other problems that plague both town and county, as well as any sort of federal agencies that can be involved. And those are larger discussions for another time.
Similar, I recognize that the task force is established only to look at OHV strategy for the town. I was curious what the status of the drafting of the letter to the county was, and then also whether or not the county grant could be applied towards infrastructure investment and not just additional rangers and education. I think those things are great, But an investment as opposed to an expense may go even longer, but it, the grant may not allow that.
Yeah, so I've opened up the conversation with the people that were involved with the grant, but I don't know how we may be able to collaborate. And I don't think they do either right now. I think they're going to be working out some of those details. In regards to the letter, I actually just went ahead and started talking to Willie about the exploration historically. They have explored this before, and I mean there are staging areas that could be used like out towards Eureka and some other areas, but that's a long way to shuttle when they've done the review. So I did put that letter off, and I know you all asked me to get that ready sooner rather than later. But I'm trying to explore that directly with Willie right now. But I will put a letter in front of you in the next couple of days, Mayor.
Thank you.
And in regards to the letter, it may, just since it has been postponed now, there's other things that have come to light. We want to ask about or if they can explore looking at, continue to look at staging area options. And is there anything else at this point? Other than to how we may be able to collaborate with their funding source?
Trustee
Harper.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor Furman.
Thank you both. I just want to, I know that we as trustees in the town of Silverton are walking a fine line between blurring and crossing those lines between town and county. This is as much as a town issue as it is a county issue. And I want to make sure that we're focusing on town stuff and not on county stuff. That may bog down the process of being able to remediate some of the issues that we have here locally. Thanks.
I have a question. What's kind of the process for providing the task force with guidance in terms of the scope of resources available to address these suggestions? For example, the suggestions relating to signage or additional staff that can act as liaisons, whether they're paid or volunteers, and other physical infrastructure. Is there any guidance provided in terms of like what a reasonable investment by the town is versus what would be unreasonable, or does that framework not even exist? Will we just evaluate that on the back end once the suggestions come to us? Trustee Rella?
The ultimate say-so is this board. The recommendations, everything is going to come back to the board, and it would be a budgetary concern based on what's already built in. Let's not forget that during budget season, there was earmarked 15,000 in for signage. And I think it was you that suggested we earmark it down to 5. So if we have to make another budgetary supplemental budget in order to increase that, then that would be the recommendation of the working group to the board. But it's ultimately this board's decision on what that's going to be. Of course, all costs are going to be taken into consideration, and an evaluation of what signage already exists that the town owns in comparison to what needs to be purchased, or anything like that. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but that, of course, is the forefront of my mind, is what additional cost it would be. And $5,000 is all that's earmarked right now for signage. And we've been talking about the signage required for around the post office and potentially the bank. But now that the bank is going to be moving, I don't think that was going to be as much of a concern on the side street. So that'll have to be taken up as a Main Street concern. So there's a lot that's on the plate, and we've got to figure it out. But the ultimate say so is this board. If you guys don't like and want to take action on what's recommended, just like we did with the cemetery, then we go forward with nothing. So, or we only take it and we piecemeal it, however this board sees fit. But most of the time, good working groups come up with excellent, just like the cemetery, they come up with excellent recommendations that fit within the scope of what they've been asked to do.
Thank you. I mean, my question wasn't, I don't think was addressed there. It just was any guidance provided to the working group with respect to budgetary considerations? And it's totally fine if the answer is no, it's just a question.
I don't think that budgetary considerations were, I don't believe we were directed to let that be part of the discussion. That doesn't mean that it's not something that has to be considered, but if I miss that, please let me know and I'll respond accordingly.
Yeah, and you'll excuse me, my internet just went down for a moment, so maybe Trustee Varela addressed this, but it was my understanding that we were going to get as many ideas as we could from all the different people in the community, and then we would try and figure out what resources we had. We hadn't been given too much guidance on what we were going to have at the beginning, and then we were going to look at it on the back end. So.
Thank you. Attorney Kosnick.
I guess before the trustees wrap up this conversation, I'd like to I think it would be helpful to provide kind of just a brief overview on the difference between a ballot initiative and a referred measure, because those topics have come up, I know, in the subject in the last 2 weeks, and there's been several questions about it. So just to explain very briefly kind of the difference between the two processes. So the ballot initiative is a process that begins with a citizen. So a citizen can bring forward a specific ballot question and essentially a summary of the issue to the clerk. And the clerk then has the responsibility to take a look at it and either approve or deny it. If the clerk approves it, then the ballot initiative can go out to the citizen to try to collect the requisite number of signatures. If that occurs, then it comes back to the clerk, and the clerk looks at it and makes sure all the signatures are proper. And then it would go in front of the board, the specific question. And the board would have the opportunity then to either approve the question as written, or if it's denied, it would go to the vote of the citizens. And that would take place in a time frame. So a vote would take place within from a time frame of 60 to 150 days that the clerk gives her kind of sign off on the ballot and says all the signatures are good and look adequate. So that is kind of just a very brief summary on what a ballot initiative would look like. A referred measure is something the board could do. So the board could refer a specific ballot question to the public for an election. And there's no necessary time frame associated with that. So that could be pushed outside of 150 days. It could be a regular or special election. And that is an action that the board can take on its own. So the initiative, ballot initiative, is something that's initiated by the citizens, and they have to go through a bunch of different steps, and there's timeframes associated with it. Whereas the referred measure is something that the board can vote on and refer to the citizens to vote on. So I know that question. There's been a ballot initiative, two now that have been submitted to the clerk. that have been reviewed, haven't quite met the statutory requirements yet. But that process has been going on, and just thought that it would be helpful for the trustees and also the public to have a little bit of understanding of how those processes are different and how they work. So if there's questions on that, please let me know.
Thank you. Trustees, any questions for Attorney Kosnick?
I just want to clarify something. So if a measure is put on by the trustees and for the people to vote on, all right, they can pick whatever day that is or the next election. But if there is a petition that comes forth, an initiative, that falls into a special election unless that time frame ends up overlapping a regular election date. Is that correct? Did I hear that correct?
You did. That is correct.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
So if a petition comes in on an issue like this, does a ballot initiative or a referred measure, like how would they interact with each other? Like, would a petition for a special election be like in a preferential position relative to a referred measure, or how would they interact?
So the ballot initiative, if it came in, would have to, as Administrator Edwards was explaining, have to fit in that very specific time frame. So there would have to, if the board didn't vote to approve that initiative that came in, it would then go to the people for a vote, and it would have to be during that specific 60 to 150 day window. If the board simultaneously referred something, then it's possible that you could have, competing measures out there at different elections. And that's something that I think we'd have to look at and address in the future if something like that did come up. But it's possible that that could happen.
I see a lot of yawns. Any other discussion on this topic? All right. Our closing public comment is now open. If you're on Zoom, please click the raise hand button and introduce yourself, and you'll be given 3 minutes.
Can you hear
Melody,
me?
We can. The floor is yours.
Okay, I kind of noticed that everybody must have missed their nap today. Anyway, there's a couple of things that's going to date me that I want to say. We got a best and brightest once for the town, and this was such a good idea. The person was supposed to research every decision that had ever been made on each piece of property and then compile that so every decision made in the future included the history of what had been done before. And that was such a brilliant idea. But as it turned out, the planner didn't have time to do any training. So they ended up doing something else. So just, if you get a best and brightest, just plan who's going to do the training. The other thing is, this is really going to date me, but Kenny Schaaf surveyed the cemetery. They know where every single grave is and every single opening. I don't know how you don't have that. But I discussed this with Alan Nossman, and he died in 2006. So somewhere, and if you don't have it, you could contact Kenny Schaaf and get that because it's already done. And for those of you who are dying to get in there, I plan to have my ashes scattered. Anyway, thanks, Jim, for the point. But I thought that would save you a lot of trouble right now if you get that from Kenny if it's not in the town hall somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Melody. All right, I do not see any other public comment at this time.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to say one thing before we close
Yeah.
out tonight's meeting.
Please.
I just want to thank Attorney Paul Kosnick for his service to our community. I know that this may be his last meeting. And I just wanted to thank him for all he's done in his service to all of us. So thank you, sir.
Thanks, and you're welcome. I've enjoyed working with the town, and I'll be here through the 20th for sure.
He's not getting away yet, Trustee Harper.
Awesome. Anything else? All right. I hereby adjourn this meeting and look forward to seeing you all at 6 p.m. on, well, I think there's a typo in our meeting saying the next meeting is not until April 26th, but it'll be 6 p.m. on April 5th.
That'd be
So I
April
look for-
12th. The second, is
Yeah.
April 12th.
Well, April 12th.
April 12th. Thank you. So I look forward to seeing everyone at 6 p.m. on April 12th. Good night, everyone.